Among the great mysteries of ancient Egypt, the name of Amun, the invisible god, stands out prominently. Fused within the embodiment of Ra, he emerged as Egypt's most revered deity. He became the air and the sun, the seen and the unseen. He was the harbinger of monotheism, with all other gods considered mere manifestations of his sacred presence. In this video, we shall delve into the enigmas surrounding the name of Amun or Amen, the god who may gave rise to the expression we utter every time we conclude a prayer. Amun, also known as Amun, Amen, or Amun-Ra, was revered as the deity of the sun and air in ancient Egyptian mythology. He gained significant recognition in Thebes during the New Kingdom era, approximately between 1570 and 1069 BCE. He became one of the most influential and celebrated gods of that period. For many generations, worship of him dominated Egyptian religious practices. The essence of his name translates to the concealed, unseen, or enigmatic in shape. Uniquely, among the pantheon of Egyptian deities, he was revered as the supreme being, embodying every facet of existence. For those who study Zecharia Sitchin's Anunnaki theory, understanding the history and significance of Amun-Ra is essential. To contextualize those who study this theory, it's important to clarify that Ra is, according to Sitchin, the same as Marduk, the supreme god of Babylon. In the context of Sitchin's theory, as per the Lost Book of Enki, when Nergal, also a son of Enki, approaches Ra and convinces him to travel to other lands, Ra becomes Amun-Ra, thus becoming the deity of invisible presence in Egypt. This is how Sitchin interprets the fusion of Ra with Amun, thereby identifying with Amun-Ra. It's imperative to understand that when consulting the Hebrew Bible, we find several episodes condemning the worship of other gods. This happens with Merodach and Baal, referring to Marduk in the context of Babylon. It also occurs in reference to Astarte or Ashtoreth, also worshipped as Ishtar, who is the Anunnaki Inanna, granddaughter of Enlil. Such condemnation of other gods also applies to any form of worship that might be directed to all the gods of Egypt. For those dedicated to researching and investigating the events of our past, it's crucial to clarify that Yahweh proclaims himself the one true God and forbids worship to all others, expressing his prohibition in various verses throughout the Bible. And such condemnation spans gods that refer to the clan of Enki, as well as the clan of Enlil. Returning to the main topic of our video, let's examine the trajectory of Amun in a brief timeline, around 2400 BCE to 2300 BCE. The Pyramid Texts, an ancient Egyptian manuscript, first references Amun, around 1570 BCE. Under the leadership of Ahmose I from Thebes, the Hyksos are expelled from Egypt. This unification under Theban dominance marks the beginning of Egypt's new kingdom. Ahmose I credits his triumph to Amun between 1570 BCE and 1069 BCE. During the New Kingdom era, Amun's stature grows, making him the supreme deity in the Egyptian pantheon. Around 1353 BCE, Amenhotep IV adopts the name Akhenaten and introduces the worship of the single god Aten. This leads to the suppression of other religious practices, particularly the worship of Amun. Around 1336 BCE, following Akhenaten's demise, Tutankhamun restores the traditional Egyptian faith, and the veneration of Amun is revived. Around 331 BCE, at the Siwa oasis, Alexander the Great proclaims himself as the offspring of Zeus Ammon. Around 285 BCE, in Napata, King Ergamenes takes drastic action against the priests of Amun and severs ties with Egypt. Around 415 CE, the emerging Christian faith outlaws the worship of Amun. Now that we have observed this brief historical overview, let us delve even deeper into the origin and prominence of this deity. In the pyramid texts, dating roughly between 2400 and 2300 BCE, Amun is introduced as a regional deity of Thebes, with Amun-Ra as his partner. During this era, Thebes revered Montu as its primary war deity and acknowledged Atum, later also recognized as Ra, as the creator god. Montu was celebrated as a valiant protector of the city, aiding its growth, while Atum was revered as the mighty, self-originating god who emerged from the chaotic waters at creation's dawn. Initially, Amun played a role in safeguarding the monarch and was primarily recognized as a regional deity of fertility, paired with Amunet as part of the Ogdoad, a group of 8 gods symbolizing creation's foundational elements. In the previous video, we observed Ra's journey to the afterlife. The entire video was created based on the book The Stairway to Heaven by Zecharia Sitchin, and for that video, no other material was consulted. When we examine the validity of Sitchin's account, we find in famous works and compendiums of the history of religions, such as the works of George Foot Moore, that such accounts are regarded as the imagination of the Egyptian people. In this book, it is reported that in various pyramid tombs of the kings of the 5th and 6th dynasties, between 2625 and 2475 BC, the walls of the galleries and chambers were covered with hieroglyphic texts, mainly pointing to what to do with the king's afterlife. An analysis of these texts finds references to burial rituals and offerings in the tomb, magical formulas of various meanings, an ancient worship ritual, hymns, fragments of myth, and prayers for the deceased king. The texts gathered in these inscriptions are diverse in terms of period and origin, as well as content. All the imaginations that the Egyptians held about a happy afterlife are represented side by side or intertwined in them. The characteristic conception, however, is that the deceased king ascends to the eastern sky and joins the rising sun. This King Pepi lives as that one, the sun god, who entered the western sky when he rises in the eastern sky. He achieves this destiny now on Ra's boat, then taking on the wings of a bird and thus ascending a ladder. The gods greet him as a glorious and immortal being, and he is led to Ra, the sun god. O Ra-Atan, your son comes to you, Eunice comes to you, raise him up to you, envelop him in your embrace. He is your corporeal son forever. Taking his place in Ra's boat, he sails with the sun god across the sky, becoming a great god himself. A remarkable poem in the Pyramid of Eunice describes him devouring gods, small and large, and thus acquiring the magical powers and knowledge of all of them. This future is the prerogative of royalty. It is like the corporeal son of Ra, for whom the gates of the firmament are opened. Only after a long time have common mortals been allowed to board the solar boat, then heading towards a different conception of the afterlife, which occupies a prominent place in the texts of the pyramids, and over time was destined to surpass all others. This conception is associated with Osiris, who initially seemed to be the god of Busiris in the Delta, but soon made his way to the Nile and has his most famous seat in Abydos. Osiris was murdered by Set, but through the compassion of his son Horus, his mutilated body was reassembled and restored to life. He was vindicated in a trial against the accusations made by his enemy and became the king of the West, or the realm of the dead, whose entrance was located to the west. This is, in general terms, the oldest form of the myth. In other versions, as we will see, the tragic story is told in more detail. The pathetic part of Isis is expanded, and Anubis, in his professional character, prepares the mummy, but the essential characteristics remain unchanged. Similar to analogous myths from other cultures, the story of the god who was dead and lived again opened a door of hope for humans. The means by which Osiris was restored to life must be equally potent for others. If a deceased person is mummified in the same manner, if the same rites are performed and the same words recited at each stage of the process, the dead person will live again. Not the life of the world indeed, but a kind of life similar to that which Osiris leads in the world over which he reigns. In the pyramid texts, the king is assimilated to Osiris. He regains his heart and limbs just as Osiris had done. For those of you watching this video, and those who have already watched the previous video, do you know what I think sometimes? These processes seem like insertions into virtual realities with avatars. And actually, it even brings to remind us the Avatar movie, doesn't it? Well, these reflections will be explored in later periods. So, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to don't miss these and other videos. Now, let's return to our specific study regarding Ra, Amun, and Aten. Aten is an Egyptian deity, bestowed with the common noun Nater, signifying a god among the Neteru. According to Sitchin and other scholars like Mauro Biglino, Neteru is the Egyptian term for the plural form of God, akin to the terms Anunnaki and Elohim. Aten, in the realm of worship, epitomizes Atenism within the context of theosophy, denoting the veneration of the solar disk Aten. Aten or Aten at times intertwines with the cult of Ra and Amun, as Ra was revered as the All. The All, or Aten, in the Egyptian creation myths, emerged from the primordial chaos of None. Aten is then perceived on certain occasions merely as one facet of Ra's adoration, sometimes melded with Amun, and in other texts and instances, revered as a distinct deity. Aten, Amun, and Ra embody the unity and monotheism of ancient Egypt. Some historians, however, recount that Aten was not merged with the expressions of Ra or Amun. On the contrary, the worship of Aten or Aten represents a movement that is also henotheistic or monotheistic, but is opposed to Amun-Ra. Many point out that the assassination of Akhenaten was precisely carried out by worshippers of Amun-Ra or Amun-Ra. Within the Ogdoad, Amun wasn't seen as more influential than his counterparts. He epitomized the concept of concealment or ambiguity, while others in the group symbolized more tangible ideas like darkness, water, and eternity. This ambiguous nature of Amun allowed followers to interpret him based on their personal needs and beliefs. Unlike a deity representing darkness or water, who couldn't simultaneously symbolize their opposites, Amun's representation of life's enigmatic nature made him adaptable to various facets of existence. Around 1800 BCE, the Hyksos, believed to be from the Levant, began settling in Egypt. By approximately 1720 BCE, they had gained enough influence to dominate Lower Egypt, diminishing Thebes' significance. This period, known as the Second Intermediate Period, circa 1782 to 1570 BCE, saw the Hyksos reigning over Egypt. However, around 1570 BCE, Prince Ahmose IV, circa 1550 to 1525 BCE, expelled the Hyksos and restored Thebes' prominence. From the Middle Kingdom era, circa 2040 to 1782 BCE, Amun's influence in Thebes had been on the rise. He was part of the Theban triad, alongside his partner Mut, who succeeded Amunet, and their offspring, Khonsu, the lunar deity. After Ahmose III's triumph over the Hyksos, he credited his success to Amun and associated him with the renowned sun deity, Ra. Given Amun's undefined nature, he could easily be merged with other attributes. This led to the fusion of life's mysterious essence with its visible life-sustaining element, the sun. Consequently, Amun evolved into Amun-Ra, the universe's creator and the supreme deity. During the rise of Amun in the New Kingdom era, he was revered as the one who emerged from himself and the supreme ruler of deities, believed to have birthed all entities, including his own existence. He was linked with the sun deity Ra, who was previously connected to the ancient god Atum from Heliopolis. Even though Amun adopted many characteristics of Atum and largely overshadowed him, they were still recognized as separate gods, with Atum continuing to receive respect. As Amun-Ra, he merged his unseen essence, represented by the intangible wind, with his tangible presence as the sun that sustains life. In Amun, the vital elements of both Ra and Atum were fused to form a deity that represented every dimension of the universe. His following was so vast that the religious beliefs of Egypt leaned towards monotheism, with Amun almost reaching the stature of a singular omnipotent god. This immense reverence for the god paved the way for Egypt's first monotheistic shift under Akhenaten, circa 1353 to 1336 BCE, who prohibited the worship of multiple gods and declared Aten as the sole divine entity. While history often interprets Akhenaten's actions as genuine religious transformation, it's probable that his motivations stemmed from the immense affluence of Amun's priests. By the time of Akhenaten's reign, these priests possessed wealth and land surpassing even the pharaohs. After being recognized as the universe's paramount deity, Amun was bestowed with titles that attempted to encapsulate his multifaceted nature. Wilkinson mentions that the Egyptians referred to him as Amun Asharenu, or Amun of many titles, and comprehending the god requires acknowledging the myriad roles he embodied. He was termed the hidden deity, an entity beyond human comprehension, akin to the unseen yet palpable air or wind. He was also the primal creator, believed to have emerged on the first piece of land at time's dawn, spawning the universe through self-replication. When he merged with Ra to become Amun-Ra, he adopted Ra's solar characteristics. As a creator, he naturally became associated with fertility, aligning with the ancient fertility god Min, and was thus referred to as Amun-Min. Having integrated the traits of the Theban war god Montu, he was frequently invoked during warfare and was recognized as a god of combat. His enigmatic essence was believed to permeate both the visible and the unseen realms, making him a cosmic deity, the mightiest in existence, and rightfully the lord of all deities. Amun in the New Kingdom rapidly became the most popular and most widely venerated deity in Egypt. The monuments which were built to him at that time were little short of astounding, and Amun was worshipped in many temples throughout Egypt. The main temple of Amun at Karnak is still the largest religious structure ever built, and was connected to the southern sanctuary of the Luxor Temple. The ruins of these temples and many others to Amun may still be seen today, but there was also a floating temple at Thebes known as Amun's Bark, which was said to be among the most impressive works created for the god. Amun's Bark was known to the Egyptians as User-Hedemon, mighty of brow is Amun, and was a gift to the city from Ahmose when following his victory over the Hyksos and ascension to the throne. Egyptologist Margaret Bunsen writes, "It was covered in gold from the waterline up and was filled with cabins, obelisks, niches, and elaborate adornments." On Amun's great festival, the Feast of Opet, the bark would move with great ceremony, carrying Amun's statue from the Karnak temple downriver to the Luxor temple so the god could visit. During the festival of the beautiful Feast of the Valley, which honored the dead, the statues of Amun, Mut, and Khonsu, the Theban triad, traveled on the ship from one side of the Nile to the other in order to participate. On other days, the bark would be docked on the banks of the Nile or at Karnak's sacred lake. When not in use, the ship would be housed in a special temple at Thebes built to its specifications, and every year the floating temple would be refurbished and repainted or rebuilt. Other barks of Amun were built elsewhere in Egypt, and there were other floating temples to other deities, but Amun's bark of Thebes was said to be especially impressive. The kind of wealth King Ahmose Phai had at his command to enable him to build the elaborate bark for Amun would eventually appear minuscule when compared to the riches amassed by the priests of Amun at Thebes and elsewhere. By the time of Amenhotep III, circa 1386 to 1353 BCE, the priests owned more land, had more cash on hand, and were almost as powerful as the pharaoh. Amenhotep III introduced religious reforms in an attempt to curb the power of the priesthood, but they were fairly ineffective. His most significant reform was the elevation of a formerly minor deity, Aten, to his personal patron, and encouraged the worship of this god alongside Amun. The cult of Amun was unaffected by this, however, and continued to grow. Aten was already associated with Amun and with Ra as the solar disk representative of the sun's divine power. The symbol of Aten simply became another way in which to express one's devotion to Amun, and the priests continued to live their comfortable lives of privilege and power. This situation changed dramatically when Amenhotep IV, circa 1353 to 1336 BCE, succeeded his father as pharaoh. For the first 5 years of his reign, Amenhotep IV followed the policies and practices of his father, but then changed his name to Akhenaten, meaning successful for, or of great use to, the god Aten, and initiated dramatic religious reforms which affected every aspect of life in Egypt. Religious life was intimately tied to one's daily existence, and the gods were a part of one's work, one's family, and one's leisure activities. The people relied on the temples of the gods not just as a source of spiritual comfort and security, but as places of employment, food depots, doctors' offices, counseling centers, and shopping centers. Akhenaten closed the temples and forbade the traditional worship of the gods of Egypt. He proclaimed Aten the one true god and the only deity worthy of veneration. He had a new city built, Akhetaten, and abandoned Thebes as his capital. Upon relocating to Akhetaten, Akhenaten didn't merely sideline the other deities of Egypt, but actively opposed them. Amun, in particular, faced Akhenaten's wrath, with his representations and name being systematically erased. However, in secrecy, many Egyptians held on to their traditional beliefs, even though only the Aten cult received official endorsement. Upon Akhenaten's passing in 1336 BCE, his heir, initially named Tutankhaten, ascended the throne. He soon adopted the name Tutankhamun, circa 1336 to 1327 BCE, and reverted the capital to Thebes. Under his reign, the ancient Egyptian faith was revived, and all temples were reopened. Following his demise, Horemheb, circa 1320 to 1292 BCE, emerged as the pharaoh after a brief tussle for power. He went to great lengths to erase any trace of Akhenaten and his lineage, restoring the old deities to their esteemed positions. Yet the influence of Akhenaten's religious reforms lingered. Some even posit that Moses, the Hebrew prophet, was an Aten priest who departed Egypt to found a monotheistic society elsewhere, a theory delved into by Sigmund Freud in his book Moses and Monotheism. Post-Horemheb's era, the Amun cult regained its former glory and popularity. By the Ramessid period, circa 1186 to 1077 BCE, the Amun priests had amassed enough clout to govern Upper Egypt from Thebes, even assuming pharaonic roles. Their dominance played a pivotal role in the new kingdom's decline. Even during the Third Intermediate Period, circa 1069 to 525 BCE, as the Isis cult grew, the Amun priests retained their stronghold in Thebes. Ahmose I notably enhanced the role of royal women by designating them as divine wives of Amun, allowing them to partake in religious events. While this role predated Ahmose I, he elevated its significance. The title of God's wife of Amun became even more influential over time. The Nubian rulers of the 25th dynasty upheld this tradition, leading to a renewed devotion to Amun, as the Nubians had embraced this deity. Even after the Assyrian ruler Ashurbanipal plundered Thebes in 666 BCE, Amun's veneration persisted across Egypt. For the first time, the Assyrian Empire brought together Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Israel under a single governance. This empire was situated at the heart of what was then considered the civilized world, often referred to by the Greeks as the Oikumene. However, with the passing of Assurbanipal around 627 BCE, the empire lost its most competent leader, leading the Near East into almost 100 years of chaotic transitions. Various groups, including the Babylonian Chaldeans, Egyptian Saites, and Judean monarchs of Palestine, vied for control in the wake of the empire's decline. The military upheavals at this pivotal point had even broader cultural implications. This era was marked by significant intellectual and spiritual developments across the Oikumene. During this volatile century, many influential thinkers and religious leaders emerged, shaping future ideologies. These included the early philosophers of Greece, Israel's major exilic prophets, Zoroaster in Iran, Buddha in India, and both Lao Tse and Confucius in China. While it's challenging to draw direct links between these distinct cultural shifts spread across vast regions, their near-simultaneous emergence hints at shared underlying factors, reminiscent of the historical ebbs and flows in the more confined earlier stages of the Oikumene. Amun's reverence was not just limited to formal religious practices, but also resonated deeply with the everyday beliefs of the masses. This deity was seen as a champion for the ordinary person, often referred to as the counselor of the meek and the one who responds to the cries of the underprivileged. As Amun of the Path, he was hailed as the guardian of those on journeys. Queen Hatshepsut, who ruled from 1479 to 1458 BCE, asserted that Amun was her biological father, using this claim to solidify her position as a ruler. Centuries later, in 331 BCE, Alexander the Great made a similar proclamation at the Siwa Oasis, declaring himself a descendant of Zeus Ammon, the Hellenistic interpretation of the deity. In Greek culture, Zeus Ammon was portrayed as Zeus with Amun's characteristic ram's horns, symbolizing strength and masculinity through symbols like the bull and the ram. The Romans adopted this deity as Jupiter Ammon, revering him for the same attributes recognized elsewhere. While Isis's worship began to overshadow Amun's in Egypt, Thebes continued its devotion to him even after facing devastation from the Assyrian conquest. His influence was particularly strong in the Sudan region, where his clergy amassed significant power and wealth, even influencing the Meroitic kings. A notable event from this era was when King Ergamenes of Meroe, mirroring Akhenaten's actions in Egypt, took a stand against Amun's influential priests. Around 285 BCE, he ordered their execution, distancing Meroe from Egyptian influence and asserting its independence. Yet Amun's significance persisted in Meroe and other regions, maintaining his status as a formidable god. According to historians, the cult of the deity known as Amen remained strong until around the 5th century CE, during classical antiquity, when the rise of Christianity overshadowed the ancient deities. And in this regard, in the future, we will delve further into the studies of the well-known Egyptian trinities, Isis, Osiris, and Horus, in addition to Amun, Ra, and Ptah, with Ptah being the one who shapes the world, and Amun and Ra as those who cannot be known. Their nature within Amun is concealed and beyond understanding. He is a link to Ra, the unseen. He is everything. He exists in all, and his name is Amen. From this, a question seems to persist in the minds of those who delve into the great mysteries of investigation in search of the one true God. Whispers of a singular deity have been heard numerous times: Ra, Aton, Amon, the fusion Amun-Ra, Marduk in Babylon, and finally, the most well-known and currently worshipped deity, Yahweh. While conducting my research for this video, I came across an extremely interesting scientific article. It is titled, "Some Aspects of Amun," and was written by Wainwright, published by the Journal of Egyptian Archaeology in 1934. In this article, the author makes it clear that he finds strong similarities between Amun-Ra and Yahweh. He states, "The well-known identification of Amun with Zeus, the Greek sky and storm god, was not merely a fancy of the classical philosophers. On the contrary, it dates back to around the year 900 BC at least, when it would have been due to a similarity in nature. Seth believes that Amun was, or could have been, the original from whom Yahweh was derived. This is perhaps an overreach, but it does highlight the similarities between them. Initially, Yahweh himself was another sky or air god like Amun, and there are several remarkable coincidences between the characteristics and worships of the two gods. All this evidence serves to reinforce the belief that Amun was one of those sky gods so prevalent in the Near East. After this text written in 1934, I think we can conclude the video with deep reflections on this matter, don't you think? But in fact, before that, I must point out, the Hebrews were present in Egypt, and the worship of Egyptian gods, including Amun-Ra, was forbidden by Yahweh, as was the worship of all other gods. However, these same Hebrews are considered God's chosen people, and in this case, by Yahweh. It's very likely, from my perspective, that the term Amen, which is of Hebrew origin, has its roots in the worship of Amun or Amun-Ra. And this reflection, it must be said, should be undertaken by each individual. We conclude our video with a reverence to the All, to unity, and to the principle of the universe.